Hello everyone, I'm Evan Soltoff with Eggersmann Houston, and today we're joined with Jennifer Burgess Loh of Burgess Loh Interiors. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Evan. I'm very excited to be here.
We're very excited to have you. Today we're going to be talking to Jennifer about some of the secret sauce and that special thing that brings success to her business and all the wonderful clients that she works with. Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about that one special thing that you think brings the greatest success to your business and your customers.
I think our magic recipe for the happiness and customer service we give our clients is that it involves three things: collaboration, conversation, and creativity. And if those three things are wrapped up in a project, then you have a very successful outcome.
Wow, okay. So those are listening to your customer and providing those services,
Yes.
those three elements is the most important thing, for sure. Yeah.
And so in the beginning of the process, we have onboarding where we sit down with the client, we discuss what's their lifestyle, what's their design aesthetic, what's their, how are they going to be using the home? Is it going to be used for entertaining? Or do they have kids, pets? All of those things come into play, you know, when you design for the client. And once you learn how they will actually function and use the space, it's creates a great working environment.
So it almost comes naturally in that sense that just, you know, the design development just
Yes.
sort of breathes life from their
correct.
information.
That's correct. And from that, I think in the beginning, with that openness, you need to develop that with your clients so they trust you. And then you can springboard off that with your design concepts and the creativity, and then being able to convey their aesthetic the way they're seeing it, and you get it down actually in the finished project.
I mean, so many times we take for granted, I think, especially being in the design field, that clients, we think maybe they can see it the way that we can, but we realize they can't, right? So you really have to, your job is to show them that, and
Exactly.
in the way that they would understand it, and that's a challenge.
That's correct. And it's kind of drawing that information out of them, because a lot of times they don't understand that they're telling you really what they want. And we have all this crazy design lingo that they're not comfortable with. And so it's just really, again, developing that trusting relationship with them, because once you have that, and then just the springboard off with the design aesthetic, then it's a great mixture for a successful project.
That makes a lot of sense. So Jennifer, we've worked with you on many projects, and I've seen you and your team transform some homes into amazing masterpieces. And you know, if you could tell us a little bit about maybe the history, how you began your journey into interior design, where you started, and what really, you know, provides you that inspiration to work with these customers.
So Evan, I always wanted to be an interior designer. My aunt is an interior designer. But when I went to school at the University of Texas, my parents didn't think that was a great career for me to be involved with, because Houston was going through some really hard economic times. So they thought lawyer, doctor, you know, business owner would be, or business entrepreneur would be better match, which none of that fed my creativity.
Right.
So the closest thing I could find was fashion through the retail side, so through the business side, and my degree was in textile and clothing.
Okay.
And at the
So
end,
in the middle between what your parents wanted and a little bit feeding some of your creative side.
right. So in the last 6 months of the program requires you to do an internship with a company. And I got an internship at a small women's boutique in Houston. It was in River Oaks. It's not around anymore. And I was 2 days into the internship, and I called my parents and I said, I don't want to do this. I've made a mistake.
You knew.
I had made a mistake. And I knew. And so
And what did they say? Were they okay with that?
oh, sure, they always supported what I did. But my dad was like, okay, well, I paid for the first degree.
So you got to figure
pay
out
for
the
the second
second
one.
one. It means that much more then to you, yeah.
Yes. So I called the Art Institute and found out they had a night program. And I would do my internship during the day, and I did the night school for design. And then when I graduated from UT and finished the internship, I moved into their day program at the Art Institute. And that's where I got my interior design degree.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
So you were really, I mean, day and night working to make sure that you could have this degree. That's great.
Yes.
And how about your first client experience? Where did that come in?
So my first client actually came while I was in school. So the same boutique I worked for, one of her dear friends was the wife of Brian Stringer. And Brian Stringer was a designer who also had a very high-end antique store here in Houston. And so she said, why don't you come work for him on the weekends? And you can learn all about the antique furniture industry. You'll have his mentoring for design, and I think it would be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
So on the weekends, I would take projects I was working on in school. A lot of times we had to do renderings because it was either hit or miss. On the weekends, if it was a beautiful day, everybody's out shopping for antiques.
Right.
If it's not, you could be there for 8 hours and nobody shows up. So I had
opportunity for you to get a lot of nice work done for your project.
Right,
Yeah.
and it was fun with him. So I brought my project and I had it laid out in the back in the warehouse, and their showroom was set up where they had a showroom in the front, warehouse space, and a showroom in the back. So I had everything in the warehouse space, and these two women come in, and they're walking past the work, and one of them says, oh, are you in school for architecture? And I said, no, I'm in school for interior design. And the younger woman says, I need someone to come hang pictures at my house. Can I pay you to come hang pictures at my house? And I was just kind of flabbergasted. I was intimidated. I was like, well, I'm just a student, you know.
Right.
I really don't know anything about that. And she's like, no, you'd be great. I know you could do it. So I went over to her house, and hanging pictures ended up basically designing the entire house or refurnishing it. Of course, getting to use Brian Stringer antiques.
Right.
And she ended up being the daughter of a very prominent family in here that is the main contributor for Museum of Fine Arts.
Wow.
So it's basically started my career.
Kind of launched your career at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so from her, I did her sister's house in New Orleans, and then my parents' friends started finding out about me, so I would do their projects. And so by the time I graduated from the Art Institute, I had started my business.
Wow.
And I've now been in business for, in 2021, 30 years.
Coming up on our 30-year anniversary. That's fantastic.
Yes.
That's
And
fantastic.
never worked for anyone else.
Yeah, and it's amazing that just by you being there at the store, them seeing your work and coming over and listening to what she needed, these few pieces of art, just springboarded this whole career for you. That's wonderful.
It did.
Yeah. So Jennifer, would you say that in your career of coming on 30 years, you've assisted hundreds of people designing their homes?
Easily.
Easily. Wow.
Easily.
That's impressive.
And a lot of repeat clients.
Which is the most, I mean, I know for us, and I'm sure for you, it's definitely the biggest compliment that we could ever get, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I tell all my clients that you will be a client for life.
Right. Because it's that whole partnership, listening to them and making sure that you're designing for them, and so yeah.
And like I said before, that really is what brings success to a project. Of course, creativity and talent, is a big part of it, but the client knowing that you completely understand them, they can turn it over to you.
Right.
And they have complete trust in you, and they know you're going to deliver and give them a really great outcome.
Everything that they ask for and
More.
So Jennifer, with all of these clients that you've serviced over the years and worked with, there has to be a favorite room of the home that you've worked on. What would be your favorite room in the home to design?
So I would have to say that the kitchen is probably one of my favorite spaces to design, that and the family room adjacent to that, because the kitchen is where everybody wants to hang out. No matter how small or large it is, everyone always ends up at the kitchen island or hanging out in there, helping cook, solving problems, having a glass of wine, talking politics. Yes, so definitely the kitchen.
Okay, wonderful. So I had another guess as to what might be, because I've seen so many of your wonderful works in also another room of the home. I would have guessed powder rooms as well, because you design some amazing powder rooms. Can you tell us a little bit about designing a powder room as well?
So what I like about a powder room is it's typically a smaller space, and it's kind of a room for your guests to go in, and why not wow them with something just spectacular. And the client usually will let you do whatever you want in there because it is a small space, and that they can spend a little more on it, and their money goes further in that space. And then that gives them something to talk about when they come back in the kitchen.
Right, there you go. They're bringing that conversation right back to the heart of the home. That's fantastic. Yeah, some of the, I mean, certainly exotic stones and marbles, and even just some special diamond jewel touches in the powder room. Really, I've seen some of your work. It goes a long way, and it's a fun space.
It is a fun space.
And then bring it back to the kitchen to talk about it. That's wonderful. So Jennifer, in talking about some of your favorite rooms to design in the home, especially the kitchen and living space, sometimes together, what would you say the focal point when you walk in and you're working on a design? What is the focal point of the kitchen living space? What would you say?
I think the focal point really is the cooking area and also the functionality of the kitchen. Okay. And I will say a big impression that was made on me when I traveled, which is another place that I get a lot of my design inspiration from, was I was renting an apartment in Florence. It was a very small kitchen. It was nothing like we are used to in Texas.
Certainly. Everything's bigger in Texas.
But it really was laid out very well, and everything you needed was on one wall. So they had the cooktop and the sink in close proximity, and I found for prep and cleanup, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And so I brought that kind of concept back, and I have probably designed 10 kitchens with that in mind, and my clients really, really liked it too. And it also creates one great big feature wall in a kitchen where you can have special backsplash, run a book match slab up the wall, do something interesting with the finishes on the cabinetry, whether you have a big custom hood or it's hidden. I really think that's a great setup.
Okay, so having everything kind of really, really easy access, both the sink and the cooktop, and that kind of creates together its own feature element.
Correct.
Okay.
However,
okay.
Now that I know about the galley sink,
okay,
I think that's going to be my next big thing that I design around, which their whole philosophy is that the sink becomes is a cooking station, but it's more engaging for all the people that you have in the kitchen. So instead of having your back to someone all the time, it goes in the island. And I think a lot of people for a long time have been trying to keep things off the islands. Yeah. And I think we're seeing this trend where everything is on the island.
So even the cooking and the sink, but the sink is no longer just a sink, right?
Right.
It's now this idea of...
It's a prep station. It's a place for entertainment. You can use it as almost a buffet.
Right.
It's excellent. They even have this really cool corner sink where two people could be sitting at the corner of the island prepping together.
Okay. So bringing people together.
It's
at
all
the same
about
time.
interaction, which especially today's times, I think is important. Where it's at. It's very important.
Yeah, wonderful. So Jennifer, whether it's the kitchen or the family room or the powder room or any other area of the home, what are some of the materials that your clients are working with, or you're proposing to them or suggesting, or they're asking you for to be used in these spaces?
So I like to be quite eclectic with my material choice, as I know you've seen when I've done an Eggersmann kitchen.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
bathroom. I like the space to be very tactile for the client and engaging, so I like to mix it up and use a variety of materials: glass, wood, textured wood, lacquer, satin lacquer, exotic woods, semi-precious stones, stones on the face of the cabinet or ceramic, to create a really interesting environment. Because I think through design, what makes it so engaging is that you have cohesiveness throughout the home, but within that you have some variety for the spice.
And I feel like if I were to be so bold to say that maybe your experience in the fashion industry has, in the fashion world there's textiles and all kinds of different textures. Could that also be an inspiration in some of the selections that
I
you
think
make?
so. I think the layering,
yeah,
I learned that early on, that's important in fashion. And I think when you have the ability to layer a home and create a space, it just makes it that much more interesting and engaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So I must admit that, when we start working together on some of the projects, we are only, it's so important to have a designer like yourself involved in the project because, as a manufacturer of cabinetry and a provider, we are really only seeing a piece of the puzzle, and you've got the grand scheme of it together. And some of the materials you mix, admittedly, at first we're not sure, but then when we see the whole project together, it's amazing how you take all these different materials that we would never see possibly together or working together, and it's so homogeneous but also an eclectic mix, and it's exactly what the client was trying to express. And so I'm always amazed and now know to just trust that also working with you, that it's going to be that way. But it's always great to see that end result of that mix that we didn't see before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's important. I think that's a very important point to bring up. In hiring a designer, you have to trust their vision
Yeah.
on the project. And the clients can sometimes get caught up in little details instead of big picture. And while details are very important in the design process and makes a project special,
Right.
it helps to think big picture first. And so a lot of times when we're pulling things together and the client goes, wait, that doesn't match.
Right.
And I said, it's okay not to match.
Right.
You need a little bit of that juxtaposition or tension.
Not everything is matchy-matchy.
Exactly.
And maybe this matches something else that you have in the space that you're planning and thinking of in the grand scheme.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I almost, when we talk about interior designers, when clients come in here and they're asking us, do you work with interior designers, recommendations sometimes? We realize that, you're almost the orchestra director. You're choreographing this dance of all of the people and players in the show, because while we're a small part of it, there's the stone to think of, the fabrics, the textiles, the softscapes, everything, from the floor to the ceiling, and you're orchestrating that and putting that all together. You wouldn't hire just a plumber or an electrician to build your house. You need all of those pieces together, much like a builder comes and integrates that, a designer integrates this for your home.
That's correct.
So
That's very correct.
yeah. So Jennifer, how do you, I know working with a customer, getting new business, or having a customer come visit you, but how do you really work with the customer in terms of, I know you're listening to them, but then show me how you take that and then it becomes, your vision in representation of what they're looking for.
So I think once you have their lifestyle questions answered and the fundamentals of who's using the house, how they're going to work in the space, then it comes down to their aesthetic. And I usually ask them to bring me magazine pictures or find something on Pinterest or House, pictures of things they like and pictures of things they don't like. Even if they can't tell me what they don't like or what they like, it gives me a sense for what direction to go with the client. And a lot of times clients can be all over the board because maybe they like everything and they don't know how to pull everything together, or maybe they're showing you all these beautiful neutral pictures, but all of a sudden, well, I want some red.
Right.
And you're like,
out of
okay.
nowhere. And you have to find a way to integrate
And you have to find
that.
a way to integrate all of that. So, and really, I think good design is about translating what's in a client's head about what the type of space and the aesthetic they want to live in.
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that you asked them also for pictures and ideas of stuff that they don't want, because easy to say what we want, but sometimes they might not mind something, so you add that in there. But if they specifically call out and say to you, hey, we don't want this at all, we hate this, now you can make sure that that's incorporated. But really, it's so you're taking this and you're building what they're asking for into the design vision, and trust is a major factor there.
It is.
And so the client trusting you all along. I mean, tell us about how, has it ever happened where they've doubted that or had questions about that, and you've had to address that?
Yes. I mean, that happens where they really doubt either the space or the color you put together, or something doesn't quite go or it doesn't match. And a lot of times we find, and what we're doing a lot lately is rendering.
Yeah.
Because it's, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it's very easy for us in this industry to be able to visualize it. We can look at drawings, we know how to read plans, we can visualize it in a 3D perspective view.
Right.
But a lot of clients have difficulty with that.
For sure.
So we find that the renderings aid with that, and then just talking them through the process. At some point they have to let go and trust you.
Right. Right.
And those are the successful projects. The projects where there's not that level of trust, it just never ends up being a successful
jive.
project.
Yeah. That's great. So
Thank goodness we have successful projects.
Yes. Yes. But it clearly, sometimes when they can have that visual, and I fully understand that they can't always, the client can't always appreciate what you're expressing to them, even though you've taken everything, extrapolated all that data that they've told you, put it into that vision. That rendering helps a tremendous amount, and then they can breathe maybe and sort of say, you know what, I trust this. I trust this
Right.
this designer at this point.
Right.
I trust Jennifer. So.
And it is through that onboarding process too, because I also truly believe you have to click with your client.
Right.
And that's very important. So that's why we like that interview process, getting to know them, what their lifestyle is, and seeing if our team's going to be a good fit for them.
So it's almost a two-way interview.
It is a two-way
right?
interview. I mean, they want to know, they want to know you, they want to know work, they want to see what you've done. And a lot of times I tell them, well, you can see my work and you might like it, but it might not be what you're describing you want. So don't think that just because you see a black kitchen, I won't do red.
Right, right.
But so you have to trust us with that. And that's when all that communication becomes really important.
Yeah. And from your side, I think an interview in the sense that, you're making sure that they have that ability to eventually let go and trust that when you learn enough about their process together, client and designer, you'll come together with this vision.
True. I mean, it's like a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Ups and downs.
Exactly. Exactly.
So Jennifer, I know in the interior design world, architecture world, our goal is always to be timeless, and in almost everything we do, but there are certainly sometimes trends and changes in the way people are looking for things. 2020 is probably no exception. 2020 into 2021, certainly. Aside from the current situation in the world, what would you find or say that would be maybe important trends to pay attention to in the interior design world?
Well, I think architecturally and building-wise, the biggest trend is going to be flex space.
Okay.
With everyone now working from home much more than they ever did before, kids at home having to study before, that is going to be a huge trend you're going to see in the home. But I had the fortunate ability to watch a program by a company called Fashion Snoops, which is an organization that goes all over the world, goes to all the design shows, trade shows, car shows, fashion shows, Salone, the Paris show, and then they take all of this information and the trend that they see coming out of that and forecast it for every industry in the whole design world.
Wow.
So it was pretty
what's this called?
incredible.
This is called
Fashion Snoops.
Wow, that's really amazing.
Really, really incredible information. And some of the trends that they forecasted were lots of wood.
Okay.
Lots of warmth in interiors. You're going to see Mediterranean. We're going to go out of all this gray, which I'm so happy because I love color. You're going to see Mediterranean, but in kind of a more modern take on that. You're going to see a lot of texture. You're going to see a lot of shine, and a lot of vintage. Which is interesting. They joked about, you have this much younger generation that probably never wanted to take anything in from their parents and wants all this new. Then now they're really
going to be calling them up and saying, "Hey, mom,
striving to have all this vintage material." People are going to be very selective about what they choose, because now it's all about minimalizing your chaos in your life and picking, quality items, and I think so we're going to see that trend definitely in the home. And I think that speaks to even Eggersmann project, because it's an investment.
Yeah.
And building everything you put in your home is an investment. And I see a lot of times with clients that at the end of the project they're ready for it to be over, because they've been in construction for 4 years, and or let's say they had some unforeseen budget overruns.
Sure.
And
that never happens.
Never. And they just want to hurry up and get it finished. And I will say, I would rather you forego the crystal chandelier, the wallpaper,
right.
In your bedroom,
Wait on it.
the draperies, and let's do it correctly, so it creates a balanced design instead of hurrying up and instant design. I call it microwave design.
Right.
This is not popcorn at the in your living room.
Right.
This is a gourmet meal.
I
when you're
recall
doing a
you
design
actually
project.
saying that to a
Yes.
client, and I know that yes, they finished those last few items. I think it was over an area rug that they wanted, but couldn't make the decision. Just wanted it done, and you convinced them to wait till it was the right time, because each piece has to go together.
Correct.
And it's okay to wait for that. It's not going to kill the space,
Right.
So.
And that's why it's important you start with your plan
Right.
in the beginning.
Right.
And so when you have a detailed plan on a project and a good organized progression of work, that again, that's another successful factor.
In talking about the first idea and trend, and certainly for this year is flex spaces. When we talk about flex spaces, what do we mean? What kind of area would be a flex space? Like the gym, or are we what do we think?
So I'm thinking again, this heart of the home, which is typically the kitchen,
Right.
of course, and an adjacent living space.
Okay.
And whether it's the kitchen island doubles as a homework spot, or you're sitting there working, or in the living room you add a special side writing table that can be homework, or a place to do work, or even if the space has let's say doors that can close off a small portion of the space and then open it up when you're entertaining on a big scale.
Right.
I think all of those things are important in a flex space, and bringing nature into your space.
Okay.
Because also I feel like during quarantine, everybody really wanting to get outside and being able to access, nature, or at least looking at it through the window, it's very important to have that.
Right. We need to have that green space inside.
Exactly.
Sometimes, bringing that in, sort of zen out in our zen-like experience.
Exactly. So I think for me, especially in new construction, window placement, natural lighting is so important in
Yeah.
every space.
Absolutely. Okay. So in talking about the trends that we're understanding, and everything going on in the world, let's focus a little bit more locally and understand, what would you say the trends in the design coming to Houston, especially in Texas in general, is in terms of trends for this year and into next year?
So I'm going to go back a little bit to my inspirations from Italy.
Okay.
To talk about this, because this is how I've seen the movement go in Houston and particular, because we're in such a traditional town.
It's true.
But when I was living in Florence, what I loved about the Italian design was they are living in homes that are thousands of years old, yet the interior is really modern.
Right.
And it's classic, and it works. So I think that's the way you look at trends, that you have got to, it's always fun to have something trendy and make sure your design's current, but the bones of the architecture, the bones of the workhorse sofa, in a living room, or your dining room furniture, those items you really want to keep classic and not too trendy. It's not that they can't be fun
Right.
or artful, but they really need to be classic pieces, because they're an investment. It's not stuff that you're going to throw
Right.
away.
So they remain timeless.
So they
as
remain
talent.
timeless. And so I would say that with the trends locally, what I'm seeing is It's nothing new.
Right.
The Mediterranean is a modern Mediterranean.
Right.
The heavy English Tudor is now English farmhouse modern. You know, the heavy Baroque French style is going to be more of a pared down French with a lot of reclaimed material.
Right.
So you have that beautiful classic structure with a more modern aesthetic.
Because we have a lot of people that, especially in Houston, that have the Mediterranean, that have the Baroque, right? And just now are kind of coming from that and saying, well, what can we do now, especially updating our homes, reinvesting in our homes, and they're going to that sort of pared down, minimalist style of that traditional, original style that they liked. So.
And it's all about, I truly think, if there was one trend moving forward, it's keeping life less chaotic and simple and bringing it back to what's most important.
Okay. I think that's a lesson learned not just for fashion, but in general.
Right.
So, yeah. Jennifer, this has been a pleasure with you today, and I really thank you very much for coming in and spending the time with us. And really, I'm impressed with how you started your business, of course, almost 30 years in now, and how you continue to and will work with hundreds of more customers in the future and design many more projects. And we're really excited to see all those projects come to fruition.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.